All right. Hello, everybody. Once again, welcome back to the Zoop podcast. You're probably watching us, hopefully, live streaming on YouTube or on Facebook. We do it every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. Check out the audio version of this on Spotify, on iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts. Right now, and Chance, if you have that Cryon, if you have the link, we are talking today with Ron Marz, who has his campaign on Zoop right now called Resolution. The link will be in the show notes. I think we have a QR code that's coming up right here. So if you have an extra device, point it right at the screen. Go check that out and support the campaign. It's zoop.gg/c/resolution. And so with that, we welcome to the show I could say this now, my longtime buddy, Ron Marz. How are you, man?
Good to see you.
Same here. And like saying that now, I think I realized like we maybe know each other like almost 9-10 years.
I was thinking maybe 9-10 years. Better part of a decade at least.
Very much so.
Although, sort of with pandemic time, none of that means anything anymore. So
no, it could feel like 3 years or 30 years. So depends on which way you go. I know you mentioned just before we got on having a scotch. Help yourself. Don't let me stop you. It'll just make
the bottle's in the other room. Now you're putting me on the spot.
You don't have to. I'm just saying if you'd like, feel free. Conversation's not going to be so difficult though.
We'll stick with water for now, and then scotch with a couple of rocks in it. Although if the Scots saw me put a couple of rocks in the scotch, that's not cool, man. They don't.
Oh no.
No, when I was in Scotland, and I was with a couple of buddies, with Bart Sears, with Rick Leonardi, and a friend of ours who is a Scotch connoisseur, and sort of took us through the many variations of Scotch that the bar had over there. And he's an English guy. He's an English guy from Greece, and so. He is, he's not Scots. So, and none of us were either. So when we were sampling all of the scotches that he led us through, he wanted to have one rock in the scotch. And I mean, the bartenders looked at us like we had jumped up on the bar and taken a shit, because
wow,
that's just not done there.
Bad decorum. It's not done there. It's not done anywhere with scotch. I'm not a scotch drinker.
Much. I mean, I guess if you're a real hardcore scotch guy,
you got to go neat.
You do not put ice in it because it dilutes the scotch. You can put a dropper of distilled water in it. At some of the bars we went to, they would bring you a jar of distilled water with an eyedropper, and you could put a couple of drops in. But as far as ice was concerned, that was not happening, man. That was the potent, but it turned out that that's the way I liked it best. So, here, in the privacy of my own home, I'll have my scotch like a damn dirty animal with an ice cube in it.
Enjoy, my friend. You're entitled to it. and one thing I want to ask, I mean, because like I see you on social media, you're always at the gym. Is scotch like a healthier alcohol, or not at all? Like that's just your relaxation.
I like it, so I have it, and then I get up and go to the gym in the morning
and work it off. Yeah. Well, hopefully you haven't been having to drink too much through this whole process. I know it's been a long time coming for this book to finally come out. We don't have to get into the whole history of things, but I would love to talk about working with, and I may say this incorrectly, Netho Diaz. Netho.
We pronounce it Netho.
Okay.
Even though it looks like Netho. Netho Diaz, who is our Brazilian artist that came onto the project when Rick wasn't able to finish it. So Netho stepped in and drew most of the book.
Yeah.
And just killed it. And frankly, when he was, while he was drawing Resolution, he was also drawing another book for an independent publisher, and he was also drawing Marvel stuff. So he was drawing X-Men books, and now he's doing Predator, which I think he was starting just as we were getting to the end of Resolution. So he's a machine, and this is sort of it's interesting because we had Andy Lanning and I, who co-wrote this with me. we had worked with Netho on a Twilight Imperium graphic novel based on the big Simon board game. Simon's one of the companies that's involved in that, and it's one of those huge games where it's, the board is basically the size of a dining room table, and it's got all of these pieces of plastic and cards, and it's a really complex game. It's really cool, but there's a lot to it. So there's this big cosmology that goes along with this game, and Andy and I were hired to do a Twilight Imperium graphic novel that sort of storyfied the game, brought characters into that setting, into that world. And Netho was the artist on that, and just drew the balls off of it, frankly.
That's awesome.
And it was, all of this, vast space stuff and monsters and spaceships, space stations, really complex stuff. And so when we found ourselves in need of an artist to take over, we went, well, that's the guy. Let's see if we can get him. And we had all enjoyed working together enough that Netho really wanted to do it, despite the fact that he was like doing 3 other things at the same time.
Oh, so I was going to ask, he already had on his schedule like X-Men and like all this other stuff, and then he took you guys on.
Yeah. So he was like, yeah, I'll do it, and we'll have to, I'll have to work it in. And somewhere in the midst of that, he got a pretty good dose of COVID too. So, so yeah, so I think we got a hell of a book at the end of it. I'm really, really happy with the way it turned out, but it was, it was a real slog to get to the finish line, because of everything else that was going on.
Sure.
Plus, doing this, as Andy said earlier today when we did another podcast, he said, probably doing a book like this and starting it in the midst of a global pandemic, maybe not the best idea we ever had. But
you weren't alone in that. Plenty of books were coming out. So
right. But so all's well that ends well, and we're really happy with what we've got at the end of the process here. Just took a while to get there, but hopefully everybody that backed it already and everybody that might jump in since the campaign is back up will feel like the wait was worth it.
And hey, Chance, if you have some of the images, we'd love to show some of the pages. I mean, one of the things that really stands out to me in this book, Ron, is the colors. It's so bright, and I'm not even sure who's on colors at this point, but I mean, the use of light in so many of these pages is like really nothing I've ever seen. I feel and it's very hard to say that anything like that in comics, but I really feel like some of the light and the different colors in this book is really like, you don't see this very frequently.
Well, we wanted it to look like this big outer space cosmic saga, and I think that's what we've got. These pages are on sort of a desolate planet where our hero Zan Maddox has. She might say she retired, but I think it's more correct to say she's fled there and is sort of hiding. These are gravity seas that sort of roll through the sky, and we wanted it to be a very different environment than most of the things you see in comics. And the colorist is an Indian artist named Prasad Rao, who just is phenomenal. We're really, really fortunate to be working with him.
He crushed it. I mean, I don't know if he colored this one, but I know this is a Rick Leonardi spread versus one of the Netho pages.
Yeah, we've got spreads in the book that are flashback images interspersed throughout the book as part of the story. Rick Leonardi did one, Tom Raney did one, Bart Sears did one, and Paul Pelletier did one.
Yep.
So we've got these awesome spreads. There's Tom Raney.
Yeah,
he's pretty good too. So
these guys know how to make comics.
Yeah, it's nice to have a roster of friends you can put the arm on and say, hey, you got 3 or 4 days in your schedule, you can squeeze something in.
Yeah,
and thankfully everybody kind of jumped in and did their thing. And it's those 4 guys with doing the flashbacks, and then Netho doing all the present day stuff.
And then, I mean, I know other rewards, as part of the campaign, and some of the other art includes, I mean, guys like Phil Jimenez, Liam Sharp. I don't want to speak out of turn, so I don't remember exactly who else is on that list, but there's a murderer's row of artists doing pinups. You can purchase all the pinups. That is one of the rewards. There's, an extra comic. This is a hardcover graphic novel, but there's a companion comic kind of giving you all the back matter. So check out all of this stuff. If you're a fan of, let's say, Ron, is it fair to say Green Lantern, Captain Marvel, Guardians of the Galaxy?
Yeah, I mean, certainly when you came to me and said, "Hey, we're doing this thing. We're going to have a platform for crowdfunded comics. Do you have anything you want to do?" I went to Andy and said, "Hey, do we have anything we want to do?" And this is the result. This is the story that came out of it. And Andy and I, neither of us being complete idiots, decided, maybe we should lean into the cosmic stuff, because that's a good chunk of our respective careers.
Sure.
Andy with Guardians of the Galaxy and Nova, Legion of Superheroes.
Wait. So, Ron, I have to cut you off. If I didn't ask you, would this book not exist?
Oh yeah,
like this.
Yeah. This was not percolating in any way, in any sense, before you said, "Hey." So this is the result of this is a result of Andy and I going,
me being,
what do you want?
Me being annoying.
Yeah. So this would not exist if Zoop didn't exist. So
that's interesting. I really thought this was something.
This was not something that we had kicking around. This was just something that we decided that we should probably lean into the cosmic stuff, because that's one of the things at least that we're known for. And frankly, working in this sort of venue was a lot of fun. I like doing cosmic books. Not that that's the only thing I want to do, certainly, but
sure.
But I like these kinds of stories. Andy does too. So this just fell into place, and the short version of it is Unforgiven meets Green Lantern Corps.
There you go. But it seems so fleshed out for something that's such a new idea. I mean, you have your character, you have her whole backstory, which I'm sure we're only getting a small piece of in this first volume, but it seems like there's so many other places to go about races of people. And I mean, just seeing the villain and some of the ships and what did you call them? Gravity seas. Like, there's just so much it's so rich for such a new, non-percolated idea, I guess. I'm amazed.
It's not our first rodeo, dude. I mean,
I know, but still, it's just very cool that like I don't have that ability to just out of thin air create an entire universe, which is what you guys literally just did.
Yeah, well, I think that's that's one of the attractions of being able to do this is, you create your own sandbox, and then you create your own toys to play with in that sandbox. It's working at Marvel and DC is great. We've done that most of our careers, frankly. It's a tremendous gift to be able to play with those toys. But you're always reminded that those are not your toys. Somebody else owns them, and eventually you have to put them back on the shelf for somebody else to use. In this case, this is not a case that nobody else is going to play with these toys.
Sure.
It's just us, and we can do whatever we want, and we can tell the story in whatever way we want, and we can be frankly as we can break the toys if we want to.
Sorry, I have Snoopy here, my dog. He's won't leave me alone until I put him on my lap. But along those lines, I do want to ask, like, aside from like money and politics and bureaucracy with working for a company, is there a preference for you of working on someone else's toys? I mean, like the toys basically that you grew up with, right? Like working on, the Avengers, for example, or Green Lantern and all this stuff like that's been around for so long. Is there something that is more enjoyable than working on your own material, or does your own material like win every time?
No, they're frankly two different dishes, and that going into it. And I like them both. I like having them both on the buffet table. It's just a different thing. look, I've loved most everything that I've done for Marvel and DC, and working on Star Wars, Conan, whatever sort of licensed property you want to name that I've been able to play with, has generally been great. Get paid to make stuff up. What is there to complain about?
No, absolutely.
But it is a different kind of thing than making it up yourself and knowing it's yours and you can do whatever you want with it. So on the one hand, you have the pinch me moment of like, oh, I'm actually writing Darth Vader's dialogue.
It's pretty cool.
And in that case, I know what he sounds like, right? I'm writing dialogue that James Earl Jones should read. That's cool. That's one of the best things ever. And certainly for me, Star Wars, which was a life-changing experience for me when I discovered it as a kid. There's nothing that you can do that really can replace that feeling. By the same token, there's something completely differently satisfying when you just make up your own thing, and the only rules that are there are yours. The only strictures that you have in place are the ones you put on yourself.
And then when you are creating a character and being the writer of this character, not necessarily the artist, when you first see that character on the page, or when it's like a finally like fleshed out character, are you ever satisfied, or are you always like, I wish I could, maybe she would look a little bit more like this, or she should have this, or are you like, no, that's exactly what I envisioned? And
neither one of those really. I'm always satisfied because I can't draw to save my life. I am a huge fan of art, a huge consumer of art, but I can't make it myself. I can't draw. I've never been. That's just never been a skill that I worked at long enough to get good at it. So I kind of feel like I have the best job in the world, which is, I make this stuff up. It's in my head, and then it goes down onto a script page, and then it comes out real. It comes out, made real by somebody who can do that far better than I would ever have the ability to do. So I never go into that process with the idea of it has to look this way, because I'm all for this being a collaboration. This is not an assembly line. It doesn't, you don't treat your art team like art monkeys. They are your creative partners. They're your creative collaborators in this thing, and there is give and take. There has to be give and take, because if you come into this process feeling like it has to be the way I see it in my head, the artist has every right to say, well, why don't you draw it your own damn self? And then the answer is, well, I can't. So I'm 99.9% of the time really pleased with the way this comes out on the page. And I like the process of putting together my story or my and Andy's story with the artist's sensibilities and seeing what comes out of it. And hopefully hopefully the end product is something that none of us could have done by ourselves. It's that alchemy of the particular creative team making this thing. If it was a different writer or a different artist, you would wind up with a different product at the end of it.
Is there something more or less challenging with a blank slate versus having an established character that you have to like work within those lines?
It's a little different because there's no backstory to depend on. There's no 50 years of continuity, and you just go, oh well, I'll have Dr. Doom come in and fight them. That so that crutch is not available to you. But the other side of that coin is you don't have the boon of 50 years of continuity. You also don't have the drag of 50 years of continuity that you have to pay attention to. So sure. There's give and take. It's certainly a blade that cuts both ways. So I approach them kind of the same creatively, but knowing that there's a different mindset going into each one, whether it's creator owned and you're making it up completely, or if you're playing in the vast sandbox that is the Marvel or DC universe.
Sure. Switching gears here, you did mention that you're a connoisseur of art. Do you have an original art collection?
I do, some of which is on the wall here, some of which is in portfolios in the desk. It's mostly stuff. It's mostly stuff that I've worked on. It's mostly pages from my stories. There's some stuff that I didn't work on that I have. But I made the decision years ago that, I should really just get things that I was involved in somehow that have that much extra meaning for me. Which in retrospect was an incredibly stupid decision because
why?
Because art that I could have purchased for $200 a page 25 years ago is now worth like $25,000 a page.
Look, I get that, but I have those art regrets as well. But at the time, it probably didn't look. Even 25 years ago, $200 sounded like a lot for a page of art. There's no way you could have known it was going to be.
Oh, sure. There's no way we could have known that. The majority of art being done now
would also be.
Is not. You can't hang up the original on the wall because the original doesn't exist. It's just a digital file. So that's a regret, but not a real regret in that sense.
Well, wait a sec. Did you do JLA versus Avengers, or was it the Amalgam stuff, or both? Do I have one of those right?
I did the Doctor Strange Fate Amalgam book. I did DC versus Marvel.
Okay.
I did the All Access series that followed DC versus Marvel.
Well, who were the artists on those? I feel like was
DC versus Marvel was Dan Jurgens and Claudio Castellini.
Oh man.
Doctor Strange Fate, which I have an original page hanging on the other wall in my office here. That's by Jose Luis Garcia Lopez.
Oh man! So come on! Don't sell yourself short, man. You must have some banger pages. Like if these are some of the.
Oh, people. I didn't say I have, I don't have scraps here, but it's stuff that like I've got Bernie Wrightson pages hanging on the wall, but they're pages that I did with Bernie Wrightson. So there's that much extra meaning to them.
Still cool. Hey, by the way, we're gonna do something slightly different here. I don't know if you saw in the chat, but Chance, why don't you pop in here, man? Chance's comment in the chat in our private chat here was that Amalgam popped my comic book cherry. So
yeah, more specifically, it was DC versus Marvel, but led up into Amalgam. But yeah, that was we discussed a couple episodes back that DC versus Marvel was my entry into comic books in mid 90s or so. So
I think what you mean is your gateway drug is what it was.
That too, yeah.
So we have you to blame for that, Ron.
I'll wear that. I'll wear that badge proudly.
So we meet in the middle 30 some years later. So
yeah. But do you hear that a lot though, Ron? Like, is that sort of like a big gateway book? Because it's like, I don't know where to start in comics, but here's DC and Marvel together. Like,
yeah, I mean that and the start of my Green Lantern run was, a lot of people have come up to me and said this was my first comic. Maybe even this was my first DC comic, but a lot of, this was my first comic because it was a ground floor. It was you can start here and you don't need to know anything.
Yeah.
Which I think is, I think it's an important aspect of what we do. I think we have to give new readers on-ramps to comics in general, but particularly big universe comics that seem kind of inscrutable. Well, you're 10 or 11 years old and you're like, well, where the hell do I start? Mm-hmm. And like when we lured Chance into this and never let him go, apparently, there's no Wikipedia at that point to go look up, what any of this stuff is or the background of any of it. Right. So when I was breaking into the business, that sort of craft was a necessary aspect of what you did, that you had to layer in information into your story so that new readers would feel some level of comfort with what you were doing. And I think that's a little bit of a lost art now because we do have all of these other sources. If you don't know something, you can go you can go find it. 30 years ago when I broke in, if you didn't know something, you either had to hunt up back issues or try to piece together what the hell had happened, how things got to where they are. And that was the job of the writer, to try to get that information in there in some sort of elegant way, so you didn't feel completely lost at sea. One of the first things that I was told when I started working at Marvel, which was my first job in comics, my first script ever was a Silver Surfer script.
You're kidding me.
No, that was my first gig. That was
wow.
Literally the first script I ever wrote in my life, period, was a Silver Surfer script.
And I know that you just had a run again on Silver Surfer. Is it still ongoing, or was that a mini?
No, we had a 5-issue mini with Ron Lim and I together on Surfer again, and
the definitive Surfer artist.
In a week, Warlock Rebirth comes out by me and Ron Lim, so we're doing a 5-issue Warlock series too.
Amazing.
Which sort of is thematically very much a sequel to what we did in the Surfer book. But what I was going to say is that one of the first things that my first editor told me is that, it was the old sawhorse of every comic is somebody's first. So you have a responsibility to that reader, in addition to the readers that have been with the book for 5 years. You have a responsibility to entertain both of those groups.
Well, now I have to ask you, because Warlock is coming out in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Were there like any mandates or anything that you had to sort of, Marvel Entertainment basically telling Marvel Publishing, this is the Warlock that we have and that we want to portray? Did that come to you?
Not really. When the editor said, "Hey, we're gonna do a Warlock one next with you and Ron. Do you want to do that?" Okay. Obviously, I didn't need to ask why, because
sure,
we all know that Warlock's going to be in the movie. But that was really the extent of it. I said to the editor, "Well, is there anything you want me to do with Warlock? Are there any other characters you want to appear in the book because of the movie?" And he, my editor is Darren Shan, who I knew back from his days working at DC. And, he very honestly admitted to me, we don't know what's going to be in the movie. Like, they don't tell us that.
Funny.
I'm just a dude who edits comics. That sort of information, that sort of spoiler information does not trickle down to publishing, at least to that editorial level.
That's amazing.
Because obviously it's all played very close to the vest. It's all played very...
but same team, man. Same team.
Same team, but I understand the impulse of, let's keep now, obviously, if there are, larger publishing initiatives like, DC's going to do a Shazam special when the Shazam movie comes out.
Right.
That sort of stuff is obviously kind of baked into the process. But for this, where there was, they just wanted a Warlock series to kind of coincide with the time frame of Guardians coming out. And they just said, beyond put Adam Warlock in it. There was not a lot of direction. It was just like, what story do you want to tell? So I gave them, an outline of what the story was going to be. And they went, okay, that sounds good. And then we were off to the races.
So aside from the Warlock series, do you have anything else that's coming out? Aside from Resolution, obviously. Again, go to the link, go support the book, zoop.gg/c/resolution in the show notes. If you're listening to the podcast, go there.
That's what we call a segue.
Boom.
That's what we writers call a segue. I've got a bunch of various and sundry things going on, some of which have been announced, some of which haven't. The aforementioned Twilight Imperium graphic novel is actually part of a pre-sale campaign for the next batch of updates for that game, and that'll be out. I'm actually not sure when that'll be out, but it's a big 120-page hardcover, which turned out pretty sweet, if I do say so.
Nice.
Let's see. I was a story consultant on an Indian television series that will premiere in India pretty soon, called Parth and Jugnu, which is is a little bit Stranger Things and a little bit Indian mythology, and it was a really cool experience to work on that. And
what's the short story of how that came about?
The short, like most things that happen in this business, I know a guy that knows a guy that knows a guy. So one of the artists that I worked with back when I was editing and writing stuff for Virgin Comics, which was bankrolled by Sir Richard Branson.
Yeah.
It is now, which is still in existence. It's just called Liquid Comics now, or Graphic India. That's sort of, once Branson decided, well, I don't think I want to do comics anymore. I still do work for those guys. An artist that I worked with on some of those projects, 10 years ago now, hell, maybe even 15, had a good time working with me. He recommended me as a story consultant to people that were working on this TV series because he was doing some art for the series. And they just kind of emailed me out of the blue and said, hey, do you want to work on a TV series in India? Okay.
That's great.
So I'm doing that. And amongst other things, I'm also part of the narrative team for Diablo 4 from Blizzard.
Oh, wow.
Which will release on June 6th.
Soon. Wow, that's amazing, man.
Yeah. So I've been working on that game for almost 2 years now.
Wow.
We're done with the game. Not so nobody gets worried. We're quite done with the game. And now it's just, fine tuning and fixing bugs and stuff like that on the technical side. So Diablo 4 will be out June 6th. I realize I'm not a completely unbiased opinion on the game, but I think it's terrific. I think it's it's a great looking game.
Do you get a credit like on like the physical package or sort of like online as the writer or whatever your role was?
It'll be my name will be in the credits.
That's cool.
My name will be in the credits at the end of the game that nobody looks at. So.
And are there sort of game writer fans, the way that there are fans of comics that know the people behind the games and kind of like seek you out because like, oh, Diablo 4 is my favorite game. You wrote that.
I don't know that it goes to that extent. I mean, people understand who sort of comes up with the concepts and makes the games, and as certain sort of rock star video game developer individuals. The larger team. I mean the narrative team on Diablo 4 was about 12 people.
Oh, okay.
And we're actually adding a few more as we do additional content for the game. So it's a really interesting. Blizzard has treated me great. I'm really happy to be there. But it's a very different experience than writing a comic because a comic you get together with 3 or 4 of your buddies, maybe a few others if you sucker in your pals to do pinups, and you just make the thing. With a video game of like a AAA video game of the scale of Diablo 4, you're working with 600 of your closest friends, and most of whom you never meet, and it's still sort of a magical process to me that everybody does their part of the game. Everybody does their thing. And somehow at the end of it, it comes together for this epic game experience that, that people will be absolutely fixated on as soon as it comes out. So it's really an impressive, it's like moving an army, and everybody does their bit. Everybody does their little piece of the pie, and you end up with this really amazing, huge pie at the end of it.
It sounds like a writer's room for a TV show or a film. Is that kind of accurate? Or
yeah, it really is. It's and the work gets divided up into who's doing what and who is writing which cutscenes and which quests, and so everybody sort of does their bit, and then so I did some writing and I did some editing too on the other writer stuff.
Oh, cool.
But it's really a terrific writer's room. It's a terrific narrative team. And I think, maybe I'm spoiled because this was such a great experience, and continues to be. But it's to me, it's a really tremendous way we're telling a story. It's not just, hey, let's fight some demons. The job of the narrative team is to figure out a way to wind a story through all of this gameplay that is engaging to you, and makes you emotionally engaged in the game. And I think we did that. I think games are certainly, just as engaging as any other story medium.
Agreed.
The Last of Us show, I think, started to, really got that into everybody's heads, because that show just ripped your guts out, and all that stuff is from the game. It's
I saw it's like some word for word, pulled directly from the game. So yeah.
So yeah, it's as story has become more and more important in games, the story has gotten better and better in games,
and hopefully more and more opportunities for you if you so choose in that world.
Yeah, I'm very, I'll stay around Blizzard until they kick me out the door. It's been a really, it's been a really nice relationship.
That's great, man. Just to wrap up, I always ask these kind of 2 questions before we get going here, because in all honesty, like, I find myself every time you say something, it brings up another question, and I don't want to keep you all night, because I could talk about the video game thing forever. And I'm not even like a video game guy, but I'm just so intrigued, that you're doing all that. But back to the world of comics, 2 things that I kind of ask everybody before we wrap up is, number 1, what's your desert island book? If you were stuck on a desert island, you only had one run, one omnibus, one, stack of comics, one title, what would it be?
Wow. I think either Simonson's Thor, which I always kind of say is my favorite run in comics.
Sure.
Or Mignola's Hellboy stuff. It's less, Walt's Thor goes from this issue to this issue, and it's a big chunk, and it's very easy to get your arms around. Certainly Hellboy there's so many different tree. It might sort of be cheating to say the Hellboy stuff, but
just Hellboy in general.
But yeah, particularly, I was going to say particularly the stuff that Mike draws, but or has drawn, but the Duncan Fegredo stuff and all of the minis and one shots that have come out in the last decade or so. It's all just so good and has such a strong cohesive vibe to it. I love all that stuff. If I unfortunately don't get a chance to go to the comic book store anywhere near as often as I would like to. But when there's a new Hellboy issue out, I usually find my way there.
Excellent. Good answers, man. Good answers. And then finally, the second question is, who would be your dream collaborator? Alive or dead, you've worked with, you haven't worked with, no limits. Who would be the one?
I mean, that's a tough call. Because I've gotten to work with so many people that, are worthy of being on that list already.
Sure.
Bernie Wrightson and Jim Starlin, Garcia Lopez and Kevin Nolan, Walt Simonson.
You've done all right, kid.
I've climbed that mountain already. Although, again, actually, Andy and I were on a podcast earlier today, and what came up with this sort of question is, frankly, the coolest thing ever would be, Frank Frazetta doing Tarzan or Conan, like a Sunday strip.
That's awesome.
I mean, if you're gonna, if there are no limits, you might as well say Frazetta, right?
There you go. Yeah, exactly. That's perfect answer. Perfect way to wrap this up. One last thing is, where can people find you online? Where are you active? What's your handles?
I am most active on Twitter until they burn the place down, which is just at Ron Marz. My website is newly updated and refurbished. Looks pretty good.
Is that ronmarz.com or what's that?
ronmarz.com.
There we go.
I'm on Instagram as well, which I think is Ron Marz, but I don't pay as much attention to that, frankly, because there just isn't enough time. But Twitter's the main one. Twitter, if you want to find me or find out where I'm going to be, that's the one to go to.
And if you can give a final elevator pitch or 30-second pitch for people to why should they buy Resolution, let's hear it real quick.
It's Unforgiven meets Green Lantern Corps. The art is amazing, and it's a big deluxe hardcover that shows off the art as best it possibly can. It's the deluxe package as the first release rather than the end release.
Love it. And everyone out there, please go support the book, zoop.gg/c/resolution. The link is in the description. It's in the show notes, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening to this on a podcast. Go check it out. We appreciate your support. And Ron, thank you so much for doing this, man. Great talking with you.
My pleasure. Let's do it again.